David Brewster here with another 3-for-all, and this is 3 Blues Saraceno Licks from 1994. And I recently finished the Richie Kotzen version of this, the Poison tour. And I kind of mentioned, in his lesson that he was fired from Poison. And when Richie was fired, Poison hired Blues Saraceno. And the story kind of goes that in late 1993, Richie was fired. And then the footage that I found of Poison with Blues Saraceno is from January of 1994. So there's a very short window of time after Richie was fired and Blues was hired that they kind of reformed and rehearsed and hit the road. And this is kind of a continuation of the Native Tongue tour. So it is interesting to watch, the concert footage with Richie, and you hear him sing and play, and they play music, from that album. And then, fast forward a few months, and then suddenly Blues Saraceno is playing in the band and playing some of those same songs. And he's changed, some of the licks, and you can definitely hear a difference in the band. And Richie's a marvelous guitarist, and so is Blues Saraceno. So it is interesting to really kind of zoom in and focus on the differences and difference in phrasing and tone. And there's a lot, you can kind of notice going from one player to the next. And there's some great licks in here too, because I'm a huge, Saraceno fan. I did put together a Blues Saraceno 3-for-all last year, and that was kind of centered around a live performance from the Never Look Back, kind of album and tour. I think it was like a NAMM performance. And it's interesting to kind of notice the timeline. In '91, he actually recorded guitar parts on a Kingdom Come album, Hands of Time, I think it's called. And then in '92, he released his album Plaid, which is arguably, one of his best albums. In '94, he released his album Hairpick, and he was already kind of working with, Poison at that time. And then in '95, they recorded an album called Crack a Smile, and the album was, finished and ready to go, but the label decided to wait, and they didn't release that album until the year 2000. So they held on to that album for about 5 years, and then they released Crack a Smile. So there is a Poison album with Blues Saraceno. It's just kind of, it was delayed and kind of half forgotten, and fans were kind of begging for it and asking for it, and then they finally released it. So it is interesting to kind of notice, Saraceno's timeline, as far as what he was doing before Poison, and then of course everything that he's done since, since he played with Poison, because, Saraceno's done a ton of things, and his music's very inspiring. He's a great vocalist, a great guitarist, arranging and producing, background music and theme music for TV shows and commercials and movies. The first lick from this live footage is this blurry, bluesy lick in B7, and he's kind of out of the box right here, and it looks like this. And one more time there. And I really like licks like this, where he's kind of blurring, that little 3-note phrase with a bend, and I've definitely practiced that lick a lot. But it starts with this kind of just a fluid little melodic line. So once again right there. And that's where you're going to start that 3-note bending cycle. So one of the things about blues' playing style is he has a lot of conviction and a bite, whenever he plays. He digs in, he picks hard, he frets hard, and whether he's bending or, a legato round or whatever he's playing, he definitely has a lot of, just kind of a defining sound when he plays, and that's from digging in. And give it a little bit more oomph or energy. And that's tough. It's definitely something you can learn from studying some blues music, blues guitarists. And that really kind of expressive and, digging in kind of sound where you're really fretting and picking and connecting with the strings very hard. So here's the live footage from '94. The next idea from this live footage is kind of a 2-part phrase. It starts with this very melodic and expressive bending idea, and then he shifts into almost kind of an arpeggio, like a melodic arpeggio idea. something like this. And right there you can see we're basically in E major. And he's kind of playing out of E major pentatonic right there in the beginning. And he's doing this lick. It's similar to the lick we started with, but it's a little different. So he's kind of creating this motif or a, you know, bluesy melodic phrase. Like phrases like that. It kind of reminds me of maybe Neil Sean or somebody like that. And once he does that part, then he basically just jumps up here and grabs this G sharp A and B. And I like that phrase too, where it's G sharp A and B and then G sharp E A E. And then he jumps up to the high E string, F sharp, G sharp, and A. And so he's kind of playing with that F sharp, G sharp, and A, does a hammer on pull off, walks back up, and then bends that A up to B at the end. So if I put all that together slowly, it's something like this. And then a tempo. And I really like that phrase. You know, you've got both halves are, you know, interesting, and then when you put it together, it really creates this kind of memorable melodic phrase. Definitely, really dig that lick. During this live concert, Blues does a solo, and it's in this huge arena somewhere. I think they were in Brazil, I believe. And you can tell that Blues is really into it. And I'm not sure, you know, if at that time that might have been the largest crowd he'd ever played in front of, because there's just a massive sea of people. And you see he's smiling and he's really, you know, having a good time for sure. But, you know, he starts his solo with a wah pedal, and he starts doing these wah licks and phrases. He starts tapping. He starts throwing out all these like metal and thrash rhythms and riffs. And you have to think, you know, in '94, you know, Pantera and Megadeth and Metallica were really popular. So that's probably why he was playing like metal rhythms and riffs. But during his lead, he plays this, and he uses a wah for it. So I decided not to use the wah, just mainly so you could really hear it and see it. And if you have a wah at home, feel free to kick it on, and you can, you know, crybaby your licks away. But it's something like this. And once again, he's really digging in. You know, he's very expressive. He's picking hard. He's fretting hard, and there's some string bending. And it's out of the box. It's basically signaling, you know, E7. So that first part, it's pretty much straight out of the box too. And then he ends the phrase by kind of walking down the blues scale, you know, that D, B, B flat, and A. Then he shifts into that G sharp and grabs that D note. And I kind of unknowingly borrowed that lick from Blues Saraceno because he plays this lick a lot in his music. And one more time here. And I think it's that last phrase that I kind of borrowed from Blues because that just sounds great. But here's the live footage from '94 with Blues playing that. Here's a bonus lick from this live footage, and this really expressive, you know, once again, kind of bluesy phrase from Blues Saraceno, and it's in D7. So we're in a different key, for one thing, And it has this kind of timeless, you know, old-timey kind of sound to it, but I really like it. And if you have your ears on, you might be able to pick out what song he actually performed this lick, you know, during this Poison, you know, concert. But it's very kind of signature or telltale, you know, Blues Saraceno phrase. Something like this. You know, short and sweet, but slowly we've got this. And I just like the way it's put together. You know, he's kind of doing this chromatic move in the beginning and then bends that G up to an A. And then the minor third to major third. So when you hit that D note, that's when you're going to travel down the G string and you're grabbing, you know, A flat, G to that F sharp. And then end on that C note right there. And I just like phrases like that. You know, it does have that kind of old-timey blues or almost kind of a jazzy sound. But it sounds great. And here's the live footage of him playing that back in '94. That's going to wrap this look at 3 Blues Saraceno licks from 1994. And this was an interesting pair of lessons to put together, you know, because I found Richie's footage first, and I started putting that lesson together, and then I found Blues Saraceno's footage. And I thought, well, wait, I could do both of these, you know, and it was kind of interesting because one was in '93, the other was in '94. You kind of had this contrast or comparison between the two. And you could tell, you know, the band performed a little differently with Richie than how they did blues. But they both sounded great, you know, I mean, you really couldn't tell that blues only had a little window of time to learn that set of material and jump out on stage and start playing with Poison. But I was impressed, like, wow, he just jumped in and saved the day, you know, or saved that tour, probably. But anyway, I did notice in the comments section that I had a lot of CC DeVille requests, and I was surprised. I didn't really expect to see that. And after I post this video, I have a feeling I'm probably going to see some more. So I wasn't planning on doing CC DeVille, but with the outpour of messages and comments and requests, I'm definitely going to do something for CC now. So I was kind of surprised, and it kind of made me feel good. Like, yeah, let's focus on the underdog, you know, because CC's been a target for decades. You know, people have kind of teased and thrown rocks at his musical, you know, legacy or whatever. But an important player, definitely very influential. And I know when I was a teenager, I loved CC DeVille. You know, I thought he seemed like a goofball, and he had the crazy hair, and definitely kind of an early influence of mine because he was like a cartoon character, you know. So I'm definitely looking forward to putting that together. So in the meantime, leave some feedback and some comments. Please subscribe to Late Night Lessons, and I'll be back before you know with more content and material. Thank you.